Welcome to my Bob Thurman podcast. I'm so grateful some good friends enabled me to present them to you. If you enjoy them and find them useful, please think of becoming a member of Tibet House US to help preserve Tibetan culture. Tibet House is the Dalai Lama's cultural center in America. All best wishes. Have a great day.
This is episode 300, Atlas, Buddha, and Letting Go of the World.
Each of us is kind of an Atlas figure, like the Atlas statue in New York in front of Rockefeller Center. The poor guy is holding up the whole planet Earth on his shoulders, and his neck is crunched uncomfortably under it, his head. He's very strong, but he's holding up the world. Remember that? So all of us all the time are holding up the world like that. Even you sit quietly and you, for a moment, don't think of any thoughts in your mind. You have a subliminal whole cosmological pattern in your mind that you're on the planet Earth, that you're in such and such a town, that you're in such and such a building, up is up and down is down, you have such and such a body, you're such and such a name, you're 40 years old, and so-and-so's in the White House, so-and-so's in the UN. All these different terrible things have happened. Your parents are hither and thither. Your ancestors are thither and thither. Your friends, your exes, your lovers, everybody's all over the place. In other words, you're holding the huge world picture in your mind. And in that world picture, of course, you're half-baked. You're a half-wit. You sometimes do right, you sometimes do wrong. You don't know this, sometimes feel good, you sometimes feel bad. You sort of know your limitations. You draw your lines. You can't do this, you can't do that. You don't understand all these complicated things. You don't do that. It's just you, the way this and that. You're just filled and fixated yourself with certain type of self-image within a certain type of imaged world and world picture. So the beginning of all meditations is to try to loosen and lighten that world picture. Let it dissolve into space. Realize that any particular part of it, if you really investigate, you can't really verify it. And so you let it sort of float away, let it melt, let it ease up. You don't have to sustain it and support it. And in fact, since you're seeking self-transformation in this retreat, you can certainly decide that anything that you see around you in the world might be your delusion. It might not be this way and that way. It might not be World War V. It might not be this and that disaster area. It might not be the other. It's just your own delusion is creating that in some extent. And then instead borrow from the Tibetans or adapt from the Tibetans' vision of the wish-granting gem tree, your own wish-granting gem field. Visualize it, imagine it. And if you can't visualize in detail because you have a limiting self-image of yourself as not able to visualize, for example, to hold a stable picture in your mind, generally just run over it, remind yourself it's there, you're at the top of the world looking at the lake, the tree springs out of the lake, Jack and the Beanstalk type of tree, all made of jewels, with every mentor and angel on it, all radiating floods of light to you, buoying you up and filling you up in that light, and around you all the beings and the light flowing out to them. Just know that you're in that vortex. And suddenly you're not your normal self. Suddenly you're rising to the occasion. You're rising to the challenge. And here the challenge is make some degree of transformation in your mind. Because that will transform all the beings around you. That will please the enlightened beings, and they will feel relieved that you feel this relief. So now we come out of the Jewel Refuge visualization, but not out of the field. We must feel we're in the Jewel wish-granting gem tree field, luminously wound by skeins of luminous light rays, rainbow light rays. Always think of liquid gems of emerald and ruby and diamond and topaz and sapphire, and just being wound with this kind of beautiful strands of light, and then filling your own mind and body up. But you don't have to sit like in some formal way or rigidly or tire yourself. Try to stay awake, to think, because now we think on the first level of the path. The first thing we must transform is our self-image about what we are as a human being. how we live our life is determined by what we think of ourselves as a human being. Like, what is it that we are? Not only who, am I Joe Blow or John Doe or Jane Doe, but like what? What is a human being? We were taught that we're some cells, and those cells are made of some sort of atoms and energies, and that we are sort of randomly created out of the way our genes have developed from the genes of our parents. But that all randomly mutated from some time back in like the methane sea. And Charles Darwin figured out, some English guy with a beard, how it did it. And then the genes were genes of apes and genes of other beings and things. And then we personally just suddenly showed up here when the two seeds of the parents joined in our conception. And then we were born, and then we've been running around. And then when the body stops and the brain stops and when the cells no longer function and we die, then we cease to exist. This is what we think we are, remember, at least in one side of our being. If we have some religious affiliation, some spiritual thing, maybe we think we have some soul that is a fixed thing or is temporarily trapped here in this physical process. Maybe that soul then gets taken away by a deity or something and put in a nice place. We might think something like that, but even then we normally think that that soul just began with the birth of this life. Now, the Buddha's vision of this was a very vast and huge vision. And the Buddha saw, like Darwin, he saw us as part of a great ocean of evolutionary life forms. Unlike Darwin or unlike the Big Bang people, he didn't see it to be possible to say there was any first beginning in some particular Big Bang or some cosmic creation where the world was created out of nothing. He thought that seemed senseless and illogical. It's even meaningless to say that things were created out of nothing. Nothing is nothing, therefore it has no in from which you can take something out. It is simply meaningless to say create something out of nothing. Things are created out of other things. This is our universal experience. It is simply an incoherent use of language to say that something comes out of nothing from the Buddha's view. Therefore, the Buddha saw that life was beginningless. The world was beginningless. It had always been going on. Things have always been something else and come from those something else. And why do they come into a certain type of something, which is us, a human being embodied with the body, mind, and speech? How did we get to be the way we are from this beginningless time? Well, he then looked and he saw, like Darwin did, an evolutionary pattern. He saw that we adapt to our environment. He saw that we behave in a certain way, and you reach in a certain direction, you pick up a certain fruit, you begin to get a certain type of hand, a hand that is skillful at picking up the fruit. And Darwin said this is then passed on genetically through random mutation, that the gene that gives the instructions to the cells to form into a certain type of hand that can pick up a certain fruit, eats more of the fruits, gets stronger, and then that favors that development within the species, and then the species develops like giraffes eat these high leaves in the trees, and then the neck gets longer and longer. But not individuals, just genes do that. The individuals are just sort of examples of a species. They have no individuality, really. They're just carrying the genes of a species. That was his view because of materialism. But the Buddha saw the same kind of evolutionary interrelationship with causation. But then he said, but the individual who is experiencing themselves as being the giraffe, there is a reason why they personally feel they were a giraffe. Their personal feeling about themselves, their individual continuity, is part of reality. Therefore, it didn't come from nothing. It cannot possibly come from nothing. It has its own previous continuity. So the mind has an infinite and beginningless continuity as well as body. And of course, mind is always interwoven with body, but mind is somehow experienced as irreducible to body. And therefore, in its own stream of continuity, it is beginningless as well. So by this, the Buddha got a more complicated view of evolution than the materialist does. And the Buddha saw that we personally have been embodied in various life forms, life after life, from beginningless time. And we personally will continue to be embodied in various life forms, life after life, until endless time. And the fact that we now are a particular form in a human body, with a human intellect and a human embodiment, is because we gravitated towards that form. We are attracted towards that form because we go towards what we are attracted to because of our acts in previous lives, because of our evolutionary experience. Just like the giraffe gets the long neck. So just in that same way, we got to be liking a being with certain senses with eyeballs up on a skull and ears flapping out on the side of the skull and nostrils in the middle of the skull and a little mouth going munch munch and a tongue flapping around inside. 4 hands and feet with like little digits and fingers and toes and different kinds of joints and things and capable of moving in this and that way. And skin that isn't very hard and very honored, but it's actually sort of light and permeable. And then we became mammals, and we were therefore able to understand the permeability of the boundary of self and other, because we bore our young within our bodies. And we united with each other, in fact, to create them. And we saw the permeability of inside and outside of the body. And then we developed the ability to imagine. We developed all these extra folds in our hard disk, or wet disk, or sloppy disk, or whatever it is, our brain. And all these extra folds we could vision and image and imagine. And in the imagining, we began to develop the ability to imagine what the other feels. We could empathize with other beings and imagine being the other beings. We began to loosen ourselves from only experiencing the world through our own sense organs, from our own egocentric point of view, and we became able to mentally imagine and experience the world from the point of view of others. Initially, only the beloved, only the members of our near species, only the child, the infant that we were caring for, and our sensitivity would only enfold them and we'd identify with them. But then some more examples among our species, we became capable of imagining all of the beings and representing all of them. And then finally we reached to becoming perhaps enlightened and feeling the feelings of all the other beings, actually, by vastly expanded empathy. In any case, this is how we came to be a human being, through developing these qualities, not through being aggressive successfully, actually. The successful aggressor is like the dinosaur, is like the tiger. It's so successful within a certain structure of relation to self and other and self and environment that it doesn't have any impulse to transform itself, and it sticks at that point, eating what is in front of its face. And therefore it's not so adaptable if the environment drastically changes. Whereas we were a little unsuccessful, probably. We couldn't compete with the tiger in their trip. We couldn't compete with the mammoth in their trip, or the rhinoceros in their trip, or the dinosaur in their trip. So we had to go and hide in a cave and figure out some multiple options. And then somehow in doing that, because of actually our weakness, we figured out about being more gentle. And then because of that, we began to chat with each other about our different miseries and how we were eaten by this and that animal. And then we began to think, well, gee, if we all got together, maybe we could surround the animal and so forth. And we began to talk, and we began to coordinate our activities, and we began to develop technologies. And then we did, in fact, become powerful and potentially destructive, in fact. Potentially aggressive. But we didn't achieve that ability through being aggressive. We achieved it by adapting to failing at aggression, actually, from the Buddhist view. And therefore, the human being develops to be human by generosity, by sensitivity to others, ethical sensitivity, which expresses itself as ethical sensitivity, and by tolerance and patience and the ability not to react lethally to injury from others, but to tolerate that and then to sort of work it out with the other, rather than just chomping them down. And then from that grew then our creativity and our imagination and our concentration and our wisdom and broader knowledge of reality, all came from that. But this is what we are as human beings. And as human beings, we personally earned our human beinghood. Yes, our parents helped us by providing genes, but we were attracted to the form of our parents. We were able to be in love with our parents because they did look beautiful to us. And they looked beautiful to us because we had developed the weird idea that it's a wonderful way to be a weird creature with a funny kind of a spine and a head bobbing around with a huge bunch of slimeware in it, sense eyeballs and ears sticking out on the skull part of that head, and some hands that can run around and do things with an opposing thumb. We developed the idea that that was a lovely way to be, which would not at all, the lizard wouldn't think it was cute. But somehow we figured that was a playful, friendly, funny way to be. And therefore we were able to fall in love with those parents. So we personally have earned this human life form by acts of generosity, of ethical sensitivity and empathy with others, primarily. And then the attendant intelligence and concentration and creativity. It's like when you inherit a bunch of stuff, easy come, then you don't necessarily pay attention to it. You take it for granted. But But if you earn it, if you make it, if you build it yourself, you really like it, you really appreciate it because you made it yourself. You don't easily want it to be taken away. Similarly, if you realize that you made your own body, you made your own body-mind complex, you created your own special human sensitivity, and you did so through these self-transcending actions like not immediately eating the first person you met, not immediately using them in some egocentric drive, but learning to communicate with them, giving and conceding something with them, getting along with them, communicating. And you gave things away to them, didn't grab everything. And when they were a little harsh on you, you didn't freak out and you remained tolerant and patient. All self-transcending actions, which are difficult. Not to follow that instinctual, immediate impulse of the self-centered instinct. And you develop the ability to do that, and especially when you were a different type of animal that just is there and its tongue flicks and it grabs a fly, and that's just the instinct. To sort of think, oh, that's a cute fly, I'll let that one go. You don't have the words to think about it. You're not thinking about Buddha or liberty or evolving. You're just fascinated by the fly, how beautiful it is, and then you let one go without flickering that tongue to trap it. And as some kind of a tongue-flicking lizard, it's not easy to get such an inspiration. And yet we have all done that. So this is called the precious human embodiment that we each have earned. And if we think about it, we cancel all those meaningless cosmologies. We begin to be a bit critical of them. We can't immediately just suspend our worldview and have a different one. But we begin to look at the boundaries of the worldview that we do have. Does it really make sense that mind came from nothing, or came from a stone, or came from a cell at a certain moment? The way the materialists try to say that the illusion of sensitivity, the illusion of mind, just arises with a certain complexity of cells. And it's just, in a way, therefore, as it perceives itself in its own intrinsic quality of being consciousness, in a way, therefore, it came from nothing. It might just as well come from a table or a stone or a piece of dirt as some piece of slimeware. Instead, we stand up for our awareness and we say awareness always comes from awareness. And our awareness is something. It is us. And it is precious. Of course, it's vulnerable, our awareness. We can suffer because of our awareness. We can also experience the most exquisite things. And we have a special type of human embodiment. Now look even at the human people that we know today on this planet. How many of them are starving to death right now in some terrible ecological catastrophe inflicted by post-colonial, post-imperialism, exploitation of the planet, climate change, tribal dementia, prejudice, hatred, disease. No thought of liberation except liberation from this immediate agony in front of them or within them or around them, their loved ones around them. How many beings are in that state? How many beings live in cultures where they're told to just follow the routine, fit in with the spirit, do what the collective wants you, do what the witch doctor tells you, do what the chief tells you, go out and kill the neighbor, do whatever, do this, do that. No thought of liberation. Maybe one shaman or one person goes and flies in the between state, goes somewhere else, but most of the people just fit in. How many beings just even in supposed educated modern society just work in a factory from dawn to dusk, get a very poor education, have no job and then commit a crime and then go to prison till death? How many beings are there like that? Or working endlessly in some fields, eking out a living in some agricultural thing, or living as a hunter in some vast snowy waste, just thinking about getting the next seal with no time to reflect on some sort of, and no concept in the culture of liberation. Even in India before Buddha's time, in the time of the Vedas, there's no mention of liberation. People want duty, people want power, wealth, pleasure, progeny. They never think of liberation. In the ancient songs of the Vedic people, for example, no mention of the word whatsoever. Just do what God wants you to do, which means what the priest and the kings want you to do. And how many of us today, even in our modern society, just live mechanically, go to school, get our grades, graduate, go out, make money, have a family, pay taxes, do your duty, serve in the military, retire, then you live in the Florida, hopefully, and then croak. And that's it. Have a nice lawn plot and hope that the heirs of whatever you've earned do better than you did. And that's it. No meaning to it, finally. because you're not there afterwards. There's so many theories, either the different ancient religious ones that fit you under some sort of inscrutable authority of God's will, or modern ones that make your life meaningless because annihilating your sense of spiritual continuity. Why would you seek to transform yourself in life in a really deep way if there's no continuity to that? If you're the person who has sought their whole life long to transform themselves, become enlightened, is the same nothing at death as the person who's just sought to indulge themselves their whole life long. The person who does evil and gets away with it is the same nothing at death as the person who does good and even suffers for it. So why bother? The deep cosmology of meaninglessness that the modern world lives in, and that all the traditional religions have really failed to control. Although they all do provide some sort of spiritual meaning. They say God wants you to do this. It doesn't really the way it is. God is doing it for that reason. Krishna is doing it for this reason, or whatever. But yet the operative, life-controlling reality idea is that it's just material, that it's basically meaningless. And therefore, if you think you're basically meaningless, what do you really care for yourself? You will let yourself live your life long just making money, for example, and saving it and hoarding it, and trying to be like a big shot, maybe a little bit in between or toward the end, and basically then just dying with that, putting your whole life investing in this sort of thing that you will lose. You don't mind doing that to yourself. You don't mind taking the supercomputer that you have as a brain that is capable, according to the Buddha's vision, and to all the awakened and enlightened teachers, according to Jesus' vision, capable of realizing the kingdom of God within you, capable of realizing the great bliss state within you. Instead of turning your attention to that kind of total fulfillment of all of your wishes, and then even on top of it developing the ability to fulfill the wishes of others endlessly and infinitely into an infinite future of enlightened living. Instead of that, you just waste your life on some sort of ephemeral thing that will just leave you at death and that will not even satisfy you, ever. Who is satisfied with wealth when they accumulate it? Never. They have 100 billion, they want 200 billion. So we now come to the preciousness of our human life endowed with liberty and opportunity. We cancel those views of meaninglessness. And for our meditation, we just suspend them. But then our meditation is not just something that we do when we sit on retreat. As we slowly think, we think about the meaning of life. We think about biology. We think about dharma. We think about something coming from nothing. And we slowly get more used to the idea that that is senseless. And we are critical of worldviews that say this is the law of nature, this is the law of reality, and that's where you fit, and that's all you can do. And we don't necessarily accept that. And if we have an instinct or intuition that we have something in us that could flower, that we could really be fulfilled, that we could achieve a kind of bliss that would be deep and upwelling from within, and that would be a reservoir of joy for others as well, not just exploiting them or something at their expense. If we have that intuition, we let that come out, and we realize this lifetime is the time that we can do that. The liberty that we have is the liberty from just immediate suffering and immediate reaction to oppressive environment. They're called the 8 liberties. And the 10 opportunities come from being accessible to enlightened beings, to great saviors, to great spiritual leaders, to great saints who can inspire us to fulfill ourselves in this life as human beings. So therefore, we reflect on this preciousness of our human life endowed with liberty and opportunity, and when we do, we find a new level of appreciation of ourselves. So this is where we start in the Buddhist path, in the path to enlightenment, the Tibetan path. And this is in all the sutras in different parts. The Burmese, Sri Lankan, whatever, Zen, it's all there. How precious you are, you human being, because you can become enlightened. Reflect on this, and then think about yourself and how you spend your life. And how much do you do that is valuable to you? What do you have to do that is just dishing something out to make a living? Well, if you can combine with that dishing out to make a living some generous gesture towards others, some cheerfulness that you convey with the food that you give them, with whatever service you do for them, however you interact with them, then you're doing something for yourself and for them in the process of making your livelihood. That is wonderful. Anything that you do just to earn money Then you spend that money on some house. Then you get greedy, you want a bigger house, and you have to spend more and waste more time. Then you sleep half the time anyway. How much of this precious quality time that you have, evolutionarily speaking, as a human being with the human intelligence, do you spend on using that human intelligence to understand yourself, to understand your world, to understand others, to understand reality, so as to be able to transform yourself, to find your true happiness? How many minutes out of a 24-hour day do you spend for yourself investing in that way? You'll be shocked if you actually inventory. We'll be shocked. I am shocked constantly how much time I waste with this precious body that I have, which time is running out. That's the first theme. True self-appreciation, not a fake self-love that is like, I'm great because I'm rich, I'm great because I'm beautiful, I'm great because I'm young, I'm great because I went to Harvard, I'm great because I'm an American, I'm great because I'm male, or I'm great because I'm female. All these superficial self-identities, the kind of false pride in them, is not real self-love, because we're really not appreciating our own vastness. Each of us is potentially an infinite being. Each of us has been an infinite being, has an infinite past experience, evolutionarily speaking. Each of us has been a god, actually. And now, as a human, we have the opportunity to become more than a human or a god, a perfectly enlightened being, the summit, the peak of evolution, that sort of form of life at the end of all possible culmination of evolution, which is perfect compassion, meaning perfect ability to feel others' feelings and help them feel better, and perfect wisdom, knowledge of what the reality of others and self is exactly, so as to be able to do that. This is what we can become. Bliss, void, indivisible, in action. Well, the second theme we then turn to upon doing this, since in this retreat we're going quickly through these basic arpeggios. Once you begin to cultivate a deeper sense of self-appreciation that really wants to cherish yourself and take care of yourself every moment, and expand your understanding and intelligence, and use this time of infinite malleability that is the human form, the human lifetime, to its maximum meaningfulness, then we have to reflect realistically on where we are headed. And here we now turn to something that at first might seem more disturbing, but in fact is vastly liberating. We turn to the topic of death, the second note in the scale in the arpeggio. Big note. And there are three roots in reflecting on death. And the first of the three roots is reflecting on the surety, the certainty, the absolute certainty we can have that we personally will die. At first you might think, well, why do I need to bother? Everyone knows that they die. But if you really reflect on it and meditate upon this, you will realize that you are carrying on. And I know I do. I carry on like I'm going to be here forever. Bob Thurman. This body, well, slowly decaying form of this body, but still basically this body with this mentality, personality, education, background, brain, body, limbs, senses. And it'll always be like that. So I can go and meditate tomorrow, next year. When I retire, I'll really take this seriously and do that, do the other, and transform myself, control my temper, control my obsessions. Later. Because I'll be here forever, basically. I'm sort of assuming that'll always go on like this. So when I begin to reflect that I am going to die, I realize that I will not go on like this. Now that doesn't mean something will not go on. Some continuity of consciousness. Certainly I know the body will go on and it will become fertilizer. Or it'll become fuel if it is cremated. Then heat waves in the atmosphere. So the body will go on in some continuity. And consciousness will go on. It seems sensible because just as something cannot come from nothing, it makes no sense for something to go into nothing. Using the term nothing like saying something went into it or became it, as if nothing were something, is of course an incoherent way of using language. Something will always transform into another realm and become something else. Something cannot become nothing. It's simply an incoherent picture we have of something sort of blanking out. But in fact, everything that we've seen in all of our experience in nature, or that even anyone has even theorized about rationally, There's the law of conservation of energy in physics, for example. Something never becomes nothing. It always becomes something else. But the point is, as I am conceiving myself as a body and mind complex, Bob Thurman, American, this and that will cease, that will die. Even Buddha died in his form as Shakyamuni. Siddhartha then turned into Shakyamuni. Jesus died. Jesus rose from the dead, was resurrected, but he died on earth as a human being. Even gods die from the Buddhist perspective. And so far, if you see the God as some sort of embodiment, if you see some sort of transcendent absolute body, like what they call Dharmakaya, truth body in Buddhism, or some sort of absolute Godhead, as they might say in Christian theology, the nameless absolute, as they might say in Judaic theology, Nirguna Brahman, the unqualified Brahman, as they would say in Hindu theology, the absolute Tao, as they would say in Chinese theology. Perhaps that doesn't die, but also that doesn't live in the normal sense that we understand it. As an embodiment, it's beyond all embodiment, and uncreated and uncompounded, made of parts, and therefore, of course, can be eternal, like space. But anything created like an embodiment, made of parts and pieces, and is separated from the rest of the world, then it will dissolve again, and the pieces come together and go apart. So we reflect. We will die. It's kind of meditating like there you are, you have your relationships and your friends and your possessions and your house and your property and even your knowledge and your memories, but then these are all lost. Look how we cannot remember our previous lives. Can't even remember many things that happened in this life. And it all gets lost. And so we will die. We sort of subtract ourselves as a self-image or a self-identity that we're pushing forward in the world. It gets subtracted. It gives up. It loses control. It dies. We die. You die. I die. Second root is then we think, well, when will we die? And then we realize there's no knowing when we will die. Just as we definitely know that we will die, we definitely know that we can't know when we will die. We could die any time. When we connect this uncertainty about when we will die with the certainty that we will die, it gives a great sense of intensity to the moment. We realize that this moment could be the last. Any moment could be the last. This means that we should savor, we should seek the vastness in this moment. It's useless to scheme and plan, I'll do this that time and the other time, because I could die before then. If I plan, then I'll do this, and I'll have the other. If I'm putting a lot of energy and anxiety and expectation in that, it is useless because I could die. And here, well people die before sick people. Young people die before old people. Rich people die before poor people. People who live in a secure, safe surrounding have an accident and die before people who live in a dangerous place. So there is no certainty about when and where death will come and claim us, and we cannot feel secure about it if we are reasonable and realistic. And then the third route we take is when we do die, now that we've become aware of what the dying process is like, when we do die, only the Dharma will help us, it is said. Only truth will help us. Only reality will help us. Only whatever our knowledge and integration of the nature of reality is, will that help us. Sort of, you could say, whatever we have integrated of generosity, ethical sensitivity, tolerance, creativity, concentration, meditation, and wisdom and intelligence, only those things as embedded in the soul, not as embedded in some formula that we know to repeat some words, not as some sort of accomplishment that we did with the coarse body-mind, not with some laurels that we can rest on, but the patterns, like the genetic patterns, the codes in our soul of having been generous, of having been sensitive to others, of having been tolerant, of having been creative, of having been focused and concentrated, of having been wise and intelligent. The code in the soul, in the spiritual gene that will go to build another embodiment, that will be attracted to another life form. That is the only thing that goes with us at death. Nothing else is of benefit. Our possessions are not of any benefit. We cannot take our bank account, our car, our house, our land, our physical body cannot go with us. Our relationships, our loved ones, our friends cannot go with us. Fame, status, power, authority cannot go with us. All of that is left behind. So investment that we make in that is all gone at death. Comes to nothing. Only the investment we make in the deepest inner quality of our being is what goes with us. Which means, of course, that no good act that we did, for example, if we give any generous gift, that stays with us not because we gave $100 to such and such, but because we liked that $100, we wanted to keep it, but we let go of it and we gave it over to someone. And that habit of giving it over and finding even pleasure in that giving it over creates some sort of loosening, a lightening in the soul, in the subtle mind, the seed mind. And that seed mind then goes, and it is the seed of our future life. It is said you don't have to go to an astrologer or a soothsayer to find out what your future life is going to be. Will I be born a yogini? Will I be in Tibet? Will I be in heaven or what? If you want to find out where you'll be in your future life, look at the seed of your mind today. What is the deepest inner part of your mind when you get away from all of your surface distractions? Whatever is down inside there. Is it a joyful, happy spirit? Is it an open, loving spirit? Is it a bubbling well of positive energy? If it is, then that's the place where you will be. You will dwell in the well of positive energy, for sure. If you find in there a little lump of fear, of paranoia, of anxiety, of unconcern, a withered, neglected sort of thing that doesn't know this from that is confused and terrified and hiding, then unfortunately you will be in a realm of confusion and terror and fear. So it is changing this deepest inner quality that should be the main focus of our life, in short. So then, these are the three roots: the certainty of death, the uncertainty of the time of death, and the certainty that when we die, it is this inner seed that is all important, that helps us through death and helps our next existence. When we have these three roots, we will rise to what is called awareness, confrontation, realization of the immediacy of death. And we then, far from being morbid and far from being depressed and paranoid, we become extremely transcendent. We become deeply intense about this moment. We recognize that this moment is everything. The seed of our being, all our future states, the product of all our past states, infinities stretching in both directions, infinite expanses in both directions, is now here in this moment. And this moment begins to become more and more infinite. And we find more and more fruition in this moment, especially when we know already how deeply wonderful the human life is, what a great opportunity for freedom it is. And then the fact that each moment of it could be the last. And what is essential in that moment is the quintessential experience of that moment in the deepest part of the soul. Then we begin to have a soul life. We begin to have soul intensity in life. So now we begin the second session, and we have learned a little bit of the background about the Tibetan path, and we have learned how to visualize basically the wish-fulfilling gem tree field. So now right away we're going to go back into the wish-fulfilling gem tree field and dissolve yourself into the void immediately, and let your ordinary personality and your mental worries and your thoughts and your self-image and your sense of the environment around you, the room, the building, the town, the planet, let them all melt away. And then arise from this spacious sky-like space. Find yourself at the roof of the world, low overlooking Lake Manasarovar, not far from holy Mount Kailash, looking down from a grassy bluff where you're comfortably and softly sitting, looking down on a jewel crystal lake. And the jewel crystal lake has a little lovely garden of an island growing in it in front of you. And from this island springs a giant jewel tree made of agate and sapphire and ruby and emerald and diamond substance. And in that tree, high up above you, above where your forehead is, sits your mentor, the being who to you represents the highest possible enlightenment, the greatest possible spiritual power, whether it be Buddha or God or Jesus or Muhammad or the goddess or Saint Teresa or Saint Francis or Milarepa or Tsongkhapa or Padmasambhava or Krishna or Lao Tzu, whoever it may be, Socrates, and then not only having to be alone, but all the teachers who ever taught you, who you ever found inspiring in your life, and all the angelic beings you can imagine, the deities you can imagine, God himself on his throne, if it pleases you to meditate that, or Goddess herself on her throne, are up on the branches of this giant jewel tree, sitting there glowing, sending down jewel, liquid, laser, coherent light rays that flow to you like liquid elixir, and crystalline tumbling down like a waterfall, like a cascade falling upon you and merging into you, this elixir of immortality, buoyant, vibrant energy of wisdom. All these beings are smiling and glowing and happily greeting you there in your new meditation space. And as you fill up with their light, you no longer feel incapable, you no longer feel confused, you no longer feel depressed or anxious. Your habitual cycling thoughts are washed out of you, and you feel buoyant, and you feel luminous, and you begin to share the luminosity of the refuge tree. And then you reflect on the beings around you, your loved ones, your neutral ones, your unloved ones. You reflect this light back out to them, and they feel a glow in your light, and they send you back a grateful encouragement, and you, as you send your gratitude up to the refuge tree. So now we're in the context just really quickly. I don't have to do it at length because you now know how to create that. And that part of the arpeggio is created in the first session. And now we can begin to turn our mind to the path itself. Now that we're in this special space and we're our meditative self, our spiritually awakened and quickened self. But first maybe we should link up with the tree. Picture yourself as picking up the planet in your hand, like you're a giant spacious being, and the beautiful green planet in the vision of the astronauts with the continents and North and South America and Africa and Europe and Asia and Australia and the Polynesian Islands, Alaska, the North Pole, South Pole, the beautiful glowing planet. Visualize that you take this planet reverently in your hands and you hold it up and you offer the planet to all the galaxy full of enlightened beings, to the wise beings who know reality of the planet and of you and of themselves. And visualize that you hold it there. And I will recite the Tibetan chant just for a good omen. Sa shi bu shi chuk shing me do dem rira ling shin yin de jem bo di san je shing du mig de pu wa yi tokun nanda shing la jabar sho idam guru ratna mandala kam yami. By giving away the whole world, you offer to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and to the enlightened beings and saviors and Jesus and Moses and whoever it is, Krishna. You offer the world up. You stop worrying and nagging in your mind about the world. Because after all, the world that you think you know is, you know from your perspective of being unenlightened, of being deluded, of seeing it only from your narrow egocentric perspective. So you give away the whatever you know from that perspective, whatever you possess, whatever you feel you connect to. You give away the entire cosmos to the beings who see it from multiple perspectives, who see it in the enlightened way. That is a tremendous relief. Let them worry about it. This giving away. And then there are said to be the 7 links of communion 7 limbs of communion, 7 connections, way of connecting yourself with this Jewel Refuge Tree. The first is the link of saluting, where you salute your enlightened beings. You say, "All hail Socrates, you who were said by the Delphic oracle to be the most enlightened person in the Hellenic world, but felt that you knew nothing. So you went to inquire from others who said they were enlightened, what they knew, and you found that it was all vain and hollow. And through that inquiry, then you brought yourself and your whole culture, as recorded by Plato, toward enlightenment. Thank you very much. Keep working through your teachings to us today. O Buddha, thank you very much for your great accomplishment of turning your heart inside out and seeing the world as in a new way from a non-egocentric perspective. And thank you, Jesus, for showing the power of love and compassion and how you could actually let hatred and prejudice take your body and put it on the rack and wrench it in bits and still rise from death and show that the power of love and wisdom is more powerful than even physical death. And thank you, Krishna, for doing your dance, your Rasa Lila, and your dance of adoration, and your conquest of the evil king, and your restoring of the world to sanity and to liberty. And thank you, Lao Tzu, for allowing the Tao to flow and introducing us to its wondrous ways. And thank you, anyone else that you might think of. So there's a limb of salutation. And then the limb of offering. We gave the world already. So we give away everything, even our own mind and body and thoughts. Give them away. Just give them up. Let them go. Give them over to the beings of enlightenment. And then we come to the limb of repentance. And we think about from our ordinary perspective, in our ordinary way, because we were afraid of this and that at that time, because we coveted this and that at another time, because we were worried about this and that at another time. We did this and that harmful thing to this and that neighbor. We took something from them. We injured them in some way. We spoke harshly to them. We spoke unskillfully and meaninglessly, frivolously to them. We were untrue with them. All of the negative things that we have done. Think about not doing them again. Lay them down. No longer defend and pretend, well, I might have done this and I might have done that. And well, there was this excuse and that excuse. And simply embrace that we did these wrong things and set them down and resolve not to do them again. And lay them out in front of the enlightened beings who are aware of them anyway. All the infinite angels who watch over us, seek to help us in our lives. We set them down, all these negative things. And resolve never again to return to them. And don't just sit remorsefully and grind ourselves in guilt about them. See through them. Let them disappear. Let go of them. But resolve never more to connect with them. And then we come to the limb of rejoicing and congratulating. And think about the good things that we did, and the good things also especially that others do. And their achievements and accomplishments and enlightenments. And then notice in ourselves that when others do good things, we normally feel a little envious. We feel a little left out. We think, why didn't I do it? How come they did it? Got that success or did that thing? And when we think that, correct that thought, that envious thought that separates us from their good deed. Instead, rejoice in their good deed and think how great they did that. At least they did it. At least they had that success. At least they had that achievement. And genuinely rejoice from the depth of our heart at all the good things that other people do. And in rejoicing thereby, in a way, share in the merit and the virtue and the glory and the pleasure of it. And then we come to the limb of thinking about the beings above us. And we think that they have knowledge. They know their reality and our reality. And this enables us to take refuge in them. And in knowing our reality and their reality, they can teach us methods appropriate to ourselves to travel the path of enlightenment and the stages from wherever we are, developing in whatever way we need to. And that in teaching us that, then we can come to knowledge ourselves. So then we request the rain of Dharma to fall from these enlightened beings. And we think of them there in the Jewel Refuge Tree that we're all aglow with. And remember, you don't have to visualize every detail. You shouldn't get all perfectionist and worried because you can't see every branch and every leaf and every flower and every precious person, or even the exact details of the face of the beloved mentor, your main teacher. whoever you think is the main inspiring being, Buddha, whoever. Don't worry, just know that they're there. And request them, please, to give the teachings. Make the teachings come alive in my mind. Make me able to practice and perform them. And then remember that these beings don't need you. They don't even need you to become enlightened in a way. They only know that you need to become enlightened. But they are utterly transcendent. Their bliss is beyond. Even your state of unenlightenment is transparent to them. They are truly transcendent. They don't even need to manifest a body or a manifestation to you. They're not there doing that for their own pleasure or benefit or glory. They are utterly transcendent. They are absolutely aware of the uncreated, of the absolute, of nirvana. And they do not even need to be present in this world. So therefore you should ask them to be present. So then you say, hey, Jesus, God, Buddha, Mary, don't sit there in your transcendent absolute state. Be involved in the particulars of my relationality and my suffering and my confusion and my distortion and my isolation and my alienation, and manifest to me, always stay with me, be my friend, be my protector, be my teacher. And so in this way you ask them to stay with you, all these spiritual beings and angels and deities and teachers, enlightened teachers. And then finally, the final limb is the limb of dedication. Remember that everything you do, even thinking or visualizing being in the wish-granting gem tree field, it is all done not only for your own sake, because you are totally interconnected with all other beings, your mothers. And you're doing it for everyone else, because any change in your mind, positive or negative, affects all others. The wish-granting gem tree is a morphic resonance field. And every bit of your mind that you turn toward the wish-granting gems, everyone else's mind is turned in that way. The planet's mind turns with your mind. If you let your mind go in some negative, paranoid, self-indulgent, self-destructive way, the planet's mind turns in that way. So you're totally interconnected with them. So whenever you do anything, accomplish anything, gain a vision, have a little sparkle in your mind, don't appropriate it and think, how great, I got a sparkle in my mind. Immediately dedicate it to others. Share it to them. Just like as the light flows in and fills you up from the gem tree, from the deity beings, the divine mentors in the gem tree, it immediately reflects out as it fills you up. It flows out, it overflows from you to all the beings around you. And they fill up with the same light. You immediately share it and dedicate it with them. Those are the 7 limbs of interconnecting with them.
The Bob Thurman podcast is produced under a Creative Commons No Derivatives license. Please be sure to like, share, and repost on your favorite social media platforms. This recording is an excerpt from the Jewel Tree of Tibet, available through Sounds True. Music for the Bob Thurman podcast is generously supplied by Tenzing Chogyal. To learn more about the work and music of Tenzing Chogyal, please visit his website at tenzingchogyal.com. Thanks for tuning in, and Tashi Delek.